Alexa, stop. Hello. Oh my goodness. Yes. About Gaia, it is very good to be back. How is everyone? How has everyone been? More importantly, what has everyone been reading while we've been gone? You don't know the song? Okay. Oh my goodness, the last time we read, I didn't have a bookshelf. Is that really how long it's been? Oh my goodness. But yes, everyone, the song was May I Have This Dance by Francis and the Lights. Diego showed me this band. He's amazing. His music videos are amazing. So I very much suggest checking out his work. Spotify, YouTube. Pretty dope. So, yes, we have a bookshelf now. Also, we have like a console to put my game systems on. So we're happy there. To 100, Diego shows me a lot of good things. Would I like to come to Argentina? I would love to go back to Argentina. The bookshelf made a Twitter burst. Yeah, the bookshelf, you know the scary thing is it still wasn't actually big enough. I needed a bigger bookshelf. Too many books. Playlist a playlist on Spotify. That's actually not a bad idea. I might do that. Rosende reads playlist. Cool. Mercy Thomas. Okay. The Outsiders. Awesome. Too many books. If I could be honest with you guys, after I finished Into the Wild, I haven't really been doing any reading. I've been very busy and kind of all over the place. So it's been a lonely time without my books, but we're back. We are finally back. We are here to discuss Into the Wild, and I have a new book that's going to go into the list from now on that I think all of us will be kind of excited to read, and I will reveal that a little bit later. It's like right here on the shelf. Like I can grab it, but put it back, and I grab it again, and I'm going to put it back. I don't want you guys to see it yet. So, do I read books and then give them away, or do I hoard them? There's that famous saying, never give a book away that you're not ready to lose. So I give books away when I think it's time and when I think I'm ready with that book to give it away. But I've done it many times. I do it often with Kurt Vonnegut books. I'll just hand them to people. So, should we just dive right in? Should we have like a catch-up session? I think we should have a catch-up session just to kind of see how everyone's been doing. Well, the last time we spoke was a while ago. So I feel like we should just kind of catch up. It's Mariana's birthday. Oh my goodness, happy birthday, Mariana. Little catch-up session. Let's do a little catch-up session. We have an hour. I don't think the end of this book is going to take an hour for us to talk about. I thought it was extremely interesting. I chose this book for a reason. I think the end highlighted a few things that I wanted us to look at. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So, have I read The Great Gatsby? Yes. I read it and I listened to it. Jake Gyllenhaal actually does a really cool audiobook of it. So I listened to that one. Also, for all of you Game of Thrones fans that are like super excited that this is the new season, Tessa and I have been binging, for the last like few days to try to catch up. Well, I'm almost caught up. I'm like 2 seasons away, but Tessa's still in season 2. So we're getting there. We're getting there slowly. What else? Am I in California? Yes, I am. I am in Los Angeles right now. Have I read The Count of Monte Cristo? I have read it twice before, but both times I've realized with the abridged versions. Do I only read adult books? No, I think I've read quite a few, like, books for everybody. I've got plenty here. And I have some books that are definitely more adult-themed. Show us your mug. Oh, this is my mug. got Kurt Vonnegut on it and a bunch of his quotes. There's the little, well, we remember what that is. And, yeah. Stella. See if she comes. Stella! Come say, let me grab her. Just come say hi. You can say hi to everyone. You remember everyone, right? Is it me or you gain weight? No offense. You look better. Okay. Maybe I gained a few pounds. Let's not talk about that. So, back to the catch-up. You guys know I was in Miami for a bit. I was kind of just all over the place for a bit in LA auditioning for things, which was exciting. No news yet. I am doing this pretty cool little project that I shot in Japan, and I'll be finishing in Hawaii, but I can't tell you more about that yet. So, there is that. But it's a small project, so I can't really go. What else? What other questions? What else was I doing? Well, that's pretty much it. Okay, so we dive into the book now. 11/11, Make-A-Wish. So let's dive in. Thoughts. Let's just go in on thoughts. First, one-word thoughts about the second half of the book. What did we think? How did we feel? How did we feel as we saw Chris McCandless or Alexander Supertramp kind of grow into this person and then really kind of Jade? I wish I had a guy at Supertramp. Do the catch-up session. Catch-up. Stella just opened the front door. Shook. Okay. Second half of the book. Confused. All right. It's okay. Sad. Yes. Frustrating. Kenzie Courtney, I think I'm on the same page as you. Frustrating. Surprised, inspirational, and sad. I guess it was a good book, but not something I'd read again. All good. That's a very valid comment. I'd never read it, so I'm glad I've read it, but I agree if I do reread it, it won't be for another 10, 15, 20 years. Sad, very sad. Did I watch the movie? I have seen the movie, but I haven't watched it since I finished reading, so I might do that again, maybe with Tessa. Confused, shocking. Ooh. I like that word. Sad that he died alone. In his search for himself, he finished alone and lonely. Well, what was the quote at the end? Happiness is only real when shared. I think that's something very true. And I think that was one of the biggest problems with Chris McCandless was his desire to continually isolate himself, only to realize that the solace that he was looking for, he wasn't going to find without anyone else. He wasn't going to find that alone. Although he found part of it alone. I don't know, interesting. Let's keep talking. My favorite book so far. Okay. Honestly, I know we got told right at the start how it ended, but I still had hope he would make it out during the second half. I loved it, though. Right? I thought it was cool. Cathartic, wow. I would read it again. Wouldn't read it again. Kind of didn't like it. Cool. Second part, got kind of scientific. Yes, it did. I was actually surprised how much I enjoyed the last bits. Still, though, confused. That's okay. There is a movie, Angelica Lewis. It is starring Emile Hirsch, and I think it's actually it's pretty well done, and I think it stays pretty true to the book. Yeah. I was not ready for the epilogue. Frustrating, but anyway, I think he died happy. I went to my senior prom and literally played Royal Blue and Nightshade. Literally the best night of my life. Didn't stay along the person I was supposed to have met with stood me. They stood you up? That's uncool. Let's just set a rule, guys. Never stand anyone up. If you can't make it, just call. It shows that you not only have respect for that person, but you have respect for yourself. Enough to be like, I am not going to be able, you know what I mean? I'm sorry that happened to you. I feel very defensive of my Rosende readers. Be like, what's that? What's that guy's name? That person's name. What is their name? I'm just kidding. Do I like Tolkien? I've read The Hobbit. Enjoyed it. What is my opinion about the immortality? Immortality. I don't know. It's a good question. Would I like immortality? No. I think one of the most beautiful things about this lifetime we have is that it does end at some point. If there's no end, there are no stakes to live. But if there's an end, you know that you got to live every day because it's going to end at some point. Like you got to dive in. It's one of my favorite books because it's so sad in so many ways. I feel like many people can relate to all the feelings and emotions he was feeling about happiness and being alone. Captain of the First Order. Cool. I found I was judging Chris the same way the others were who wrote to Jon, but when I read their complaints about Chris, I really had to reevaluate how I felt. I think the movie's on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix Italia. That's where I watched it. Sometimes we don't have the same Netflix movies. That's kind of annoying, but I think I would have liked it better if the story was told in another format. Like if Krakauer did a documentary instead of writing it. That's interesting. He could be alone without being lonely. Thank you, Aniket Fernandez. Interesting quote. I don't think loneliness stems from being alone. Because some of the most lonely times, some of the time I felt most lonely is either when I moved here to LA and I was alone, but I was constantly surrounded by people, or I moved to New York and was, you know what I mean? I do believe that loneliness isn't contingent upon being alone. I think it's a state of being. I was a little bit disappointed with this book. I thought it would become more inspirational, but I only got angry with Chris. You know, Caesar, I feel the same way. I expected it to be more insightful. I wanted it to inspire a sort of wanderlust. And instead, I found myself, frankly, annoyed with this young man and his not only desire to be separate of people that love and care about him and continually push away the people that care about him most. Now, I wasn't there or present for a lot of his life, so I can't judge him on that. But I can say that I found it very frustrating. And I think there was a certain arrogance to his ability to survive. And we see the Alaskans comment on, anyone that comes out here for what he was looking for was obviously they didn't have the right respect for nature. I don't know, but I did find myself frustrated with him. I was like, you have people that care about you, and you've met other people that care about you. You continually choose to isolate yourself and push them away, and at the end of it, it was too much. And for someone that was so meticulous to not know that the river would come back or that these things would happen, it was this interesting theme that. Hold on, I had notes. See, the point is that Chris is so passionate. The point is that Chris is so passionate about the things that that his passion consumed every inch of him until the end. I agree. Chris was a real controversy person, honestly. But it's cool how his mind reflected his necessity of identity is what he appreciates. What you appreciate. They over-dramatized. Yeah, they did. In the movie, they definitely did. I like reading the book with Rosende reads. I think I would not have appreciated that much alone. Interesting. I think conversation always kind of stimulates ideas and allows you to think of things or question things in a new way. Whether or not you're saying, no, I still agree with that, or wow, I didn't look at it that way. I think, especially with books, they're fun to talk about when you've read them. This book had too many eerie parallels to my life for me to be neutral about it. Merlin, wow, can you elaborate on that? Parallels in what way? How do you feel connected to McCandless and how do you feel separate from? How did his journey inspire you or make you realize things about your own life? I think at one point in time, all of us seek a sort of isolation from people telling us what to do or how to live. That's one of the reasons why I think Rosende reads is important in this idea of question everything. Like we read in Breakfast of Champions, we have to take the things that we put in that we have to actively play a part in what we put in our mind. And we have to actively decide if it belongs there. And I think McCandless is very good at doing that, saying, I don't want anything that doesn't serve me. But to an extent that, I don't know. Am I making sense? Also, sorry, I fell way behind in comments, so let me just scroll up. Sorry, guys. Okay. I really did feel for the old man when he found out about Chris. Yes, I felt the same way. Do you like his lamp? Oh, I just have it turned up because it bounces off the wall like a bounce, and it creates better light than if it's just like over me. And then it does this like, actually it's kind of good. But I like it being a bounce. Then I don't have to really turn on the other lights. I'm very light sensitive. His ego was a problem and it ended up killing him. I agree. I think this kid had a huge ego. And not in a very similar way to the writer, to Krakauer. When Krakauer went and did his own journey to attempt to mountain climb the Devil's Thumb. I think it was called the Devil's Thumb. Was it Devil's Thumb? But he had this idea that he obviously had what was... he didn't... I think I have a very healthy respect for nature. Fear, you can say. And I think these people had these egos that didn't allow them to think that way. We have a writer always, trying to make that, what's it called? That comparison where there are other writers and stuff that he says McCandless followed these men who went into the woods and thought they could do it. And some of them could and some of them couldn't. I don't know. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm going down to the bottom. I'm caught up. I'm scrolling up a little bit. If you didn't know from the beginning, Rita, awesome question. I'm going to go for one question above you. Sorry, and then we'll read yours. I wonder how much of it was a desire to be connected with nature and how much of it was a kind of idea pushed onto people from young ages that men must be tough and explorers and conquerors. That's an interesting question. I think as people, we generally like to explore. A lot of the reason we've grown as humanity is because there's a certain amount of us that want to stay in a community, connected to the people around us for a long time, and there's a certain amount of us that will not accept that and want to leave. I mean, and me, I see it in my hometown, where some of us stayed in Florida, and we have these beautiful lives in Florida, and we managed to stay there close to our parents, start a career and whatever, and then some of us left. I went to New York. I wanted to leave and discover what else was out there. So I think both are valid. So Rita asked a question to all of us that I think we should all take a question and answer. I think it's cool. If you didn't know from the beginning that Chris was going to die, would you have seen it coming? I get cautious about seeing an overly ambitious, semi-arrogant protagonist. I think you always end up paying for your arrogance in one way or another. So I would have guessed that he might have died, but also it was a book, so I was like, maybe he would have gotten away, but maybe like lost a limb. So maybe. His youth reminded me on my own in some parts. Yeah. I did not find this book in Portuguese to read it. Oh, I'm sorry you couldn't find it. I felt so bad for the old man. He wanted to adopt Chris. Yes. Yeah, I know he wanted to adopt, but then again, I found it interesting the old man wanted to care for him that way. And then that's France, right? He was the one that also ends up adopting Chris McCandless' way of life, which I thought was very interesting. The topic of loneliness reminds me of The Alchemist, The Handmaid's Tale in 1984. The main character knows what it means to be lonely. Interesting. It's dramatic, different, but make me reflect so much. Chris is brave. He left everything, but I can't understand what his decisions. Leave your family? I can't. Never. I agree. I think this was someone that tried to turn so far away from what people were deciding for him that it led to this. It's like he overcorrected, you know? It was going into the skid, then he tried to correct a little bit, but he overcorrected and went for this complete idea of isolation and living in a way that society doesn't lend itself to. And I think there's There's something in that I think is interesting. His ability to question everything and to really make for himself what he wanted. Did that eventually kind of lead to this isolated version of himself that didn't have anyone around to help? Yeah, but then we also know that, reading the book, that people were only miles away. Read a snap, I stand. Reading all the stories about the other explorers, for lack of a better term, was really interesting. I think it puts into perspective this idea of this arrogance. Do we only call these explorers successful when, I guess we do, when they come back. But at the time, do people say the same things about them that they say about McCandless? And when they do come back, do they decide to change their minds? Do they agree? Do they say, okay, well, he gets it because he came back? Is like Chris McCandless, is he seen as less than because he didn't survive his exploration? I don't know. Why is coffee so good? I honestly don't understand how he did that. I mean, I think at some point your body just physically stops you from doing certain things, but he kept pushing himself. I think in some of the military books I've read, there's this idea that the human body is completely attached to the human mind. And you can literally do whatever you want if your mind will allow you. Like, the human body will get tired, but if the mind says you're not, you won't be, because there's that idea that, like, back then we used to try to be ready for that saber-toothed tiger to jump out of the forest and us run away. Now there's no saber-toothed tiger, so we're always saving a certain amount of our energy for that extra. I think the human mind and human body are capable of incredible things. This book has some good quotes that made me think about things, but also helped me a little bit. I wrote some of them in a journal. I have to read them. I also highlighted them in the book. All right, should we go to quotes now? Every time you yawn, I yawn. I'm sorry, I don't know why. As soon as we start doing Rosende Reads, I think I'm talking a lot and not breathing enough. So my brain needs me to, like, get that air, and that's why people yawn. Sometimes it's because you're tired, sometimes it's whatever, sometimes just because you're not breathing enough. In the movie, we didn't know he was going to die, no. They don't really talk about it. They give it a more narrative storytelling from beginning to end, whereas the book kind of jumps around, right? The movie really tells it like a story, like a single arc, whereas we kind of start in one place, we go back to the beginning, we talk about his life in different ways. I think Chris overestimated his abilities, and that's what ended up killing him. I think he overestimated his abilities, but underestimated the things around him. Yes, Kendra, I think he was kind of reckless, but I think he was also optimistic and hopeful in a way that you see often in youth and in young people, this idea of this invincibility that I think is present in your early 20s, unless you've, had a different experience. I think I expected it. Call me cynical, but I think he just had the odds against him. He was ill-prepared, and that's dangerous for anyone who is in such harsh weather conditions in wilderness. Another thing, his preparation, like the person who lived out there, who has tried to. But then again, how many of those things do we keep as safeties? I mean, McCandless was able to do very well for himself with only a pound bag of rice, a small rifle, and a hunting knife and the few clothes he had on his back, right? Like, so it's how much of that protection do we need, and how much do we actually want for our own safety? Like, I think that's the line he was also trying. He was like, how much do I need? Do I actually need? And that's a question I think we could all ask ourselves. What do we carry around every day that's for safety that we don't need? I mean, that could be emotional. It can be physical. It can be... I think there's a lot there that we can look and admire him. He was really trying to scale down on what he was carrying around and what he needed. So cool. I don't agree with Chris, but I do think it's always easier to say and judge than to do. What he did was what he most desired, and he was happy doing it. Yep. I thought about how Chris leaving people who he loves behind, or who love him behind, I can't understand a bit. Sometimes people we love can be overwhelming. I wouldn't leave my older brother though. Well, I think one of the difficulties that he was dealing with, and he went into an extreme way, is that idea that sometimes the people you live with and that you love decide who you are. And I think he hated that. And I think we all could hate a little bit of that. Like when you go, I don't know about you guys, but when you visit family or something and they're like, oh, you're this person. And you're like, well, I am, but I've grown past that. I'm also this person and this person and this person. But they can sometimes, the people you love, I think, can sometimes pigeonhole you in a way that I think he really wanted to fight against. And he also didn't want to be a part of a society that I think the values he saw weren't the ones that he wanted to perpetuate. He's an interesting person. I don't know if I agree. Our curiosity is a human trait. I understand why he wanted to isolate himself, but definitely he went to extremes. He did go to extremes. Like, wow. He was eager to turn his back on his family. He could have educated himself and his family without cutting ties. I agree. You think he did it out of boredom without thinking of the consequences? I don't know. I think he was prepared for a lot of things, understanding the way the flora and fauna worked and what he could eat and what he didn't, his meticulous nature for notes and stuff. You know, I think these all show people that someone that I think is understanding, but I think he tested himself a little bit too much. Breathe more, dude. I'm trying. Yes, I'm going to save the live. I will do my best to save it. You guys know that sometimes I save it and it doesn't work. The masterful and incommunicable wisdom of eternity, laughing at the futility of life and the effort of life. Wow. Incommunicable wisdom of eternity. That reminds me of a Cuban saying, Merlin. El diablo sabe más por viejo de por diablo. The devil knows more because he's old than because he's the devil. And I think there is that wisdom of eternity. I mean, we've seen examples where people like Chris go out into this type of environment and do the thing and they come back and they're okay. And then we've seen the other. I don't know. I ran out of coffee. And potatoes got him. He died from poisoning, actually. One sec. I had it. They talk about the poisoning. It was easy to imagine Chris McCandless making the same mistake as the Indian woman, becoming similarly incapacitated from all the available evidence. This individual death of McCandless, rational and cautious by nature, had committed a careless blunder, confusing one plan for another, and died as a consequence. In the outside article, I reported with great certainty that H. Mackenzie, the wild sweet pea, killed the boy. Virtually every other journalist who read about McCandless' tragedy drew the same conclusion. As the months passed, I can't find it. Anyway. Hey, you. I don't feel like Chris valued personal relationships enough. You know, Annie Hansen, he did, though. But I think something about being close to people scared him. Because when people are close to you, yes, they can hurt you, but they take an ownership over a part of you when they're close to you. Oh, that's my friend. That's this. And I think Chris kind of had this, to me, it seems like he had this aversion to this idea that anyone can own any piece of him, even as a friend. And I think that's part of the downfall there. It was like he wanted his individuality so much that he when he gained these really beautiful relationships with people, they scared him because he knew that then they owned a piece of him, a piece that maybe he didn't want to give, or a piece of him that And that's what you do with friendship. You give someone a piece of yourself. And they hopefully care about it and help it grow. And then you guys have this beautiful piece of each other that you share. So I think, and that's why I think he did end up getting very lonely, because he realized that he had all these pieces of himself in other places, that people that respected him and loved him and saw him as Alexander Supertramp and not as Chris McCandless of the two parents that studied, whatever they studied and did all these great things. And he loved that people knew him for who he was, but I don't know. The idea of like the piece of himself, I think that's some sort of ownership he never wanted to give away. Because whenever you're in a friendship, you have to compromise. And it's almost kind of selfish of him to be like, well, I don't want to do that. Even deciding the narrative of how they knew him or where he was from. I think he was naive but brave. It takes a lot for someone to give away all their possessions and leave everyone they're closest to, especially in the world today where we don't really value that. That's not what university teaches you. That's not what everything that I've learned teaches you, Give everything away and just start. Society doesn't lend itself to that. But it's definitely a very bold and kind of romanticized that, though, I think. He looks like a realistic person, concentrating desire of independence. He doesn't care about people or material things, but he challenged himself so many times in life. And if challenging yourself is the root of that, then he lived a lot. Happiness is only real when shared. But I do believe that. Or is it, but then again, at the same time, is it real? Or is it just proven when it's shared? Like, you ever have that where you see someone maybe like trip and this is a terrible example, but I was like, if someone like is holding a beer and they trip and they spill some of it and they laugh at it and it's funny, and you see them laugh and they laugh and you laugh and they see you laugh, and then it's funny because you're both laughing at it. But if the person gets hurt and you accidentally laugh and you're like, oh, now they're hurt, it's not funny because they're not sharing in this moment. I don't know. I think there was something there I was trying to say, but I couldn't really get there. Okay. Hannah, welcome. Welcome to Rosende Reads. You're new here. I will reveal that book probably soon. So if you just stay posted, we're almost there. Can we see your bookshelves? Are you a Potterhead? I am not. This is the bookshelf. I've got a lot of things up there. Too many books. And it's gotten messy. I need to clean it up again. He couldn't swim, and I thought that was very interesting, considering he got stuck on the wrong side of the river. There's something to that I think is interesting, that McCandless couldn't swim, but he was so adventurous. I think he would have loved scuba diving if he wanted to see these other worlds that existed. Because like scuba, I don't know if any of you guys scuba dive, but scuba diving is amazing. Yeah, the coffee finished. I finished the coffee, and I have to make another French press if I wanted more. But there is this idea of like, he so boldly believed in himself and in his dreams that he was willing to die for them in a way. But at the end, I don't know. I don't think he wanted to die. Wait, Tiger Woods just won the Masters? Again? Good for him. Okay, I'm just reading comments now. Okay, the poisoning was the scientific part. That was hard to follow. What he was trying... It was a little weird because he gets really into the technical things about this species of seed that also has another species that's very similar in the way it looks, but one of them is poisonous, one of them is not. And he's just giving the very technical description because Chris McCandless was very, very technically, like, he really studied that because he knew that he was going to have to. And the Kender, that was so horrible how he died, even if he had been found, there was nothing they could do to save him. That's right. And it's interesting that in the beginning of the book, and many times when they talk about his hunger, it's something we see. His hunger for knowledge, his hunger for this trip, his hunger for this survival and this life he wanted to live. And literally, his literal hunger. When he would eat, people were amazed at how much he could eat. And it's so interesting that he died of starvation. For someone that was so hungry, in every sense of the word. For him to die in a way where he starved himself. He starved himself of friendship, even though he hungered for connection. He starved himself of food, even though he was literally extremely hungry and could apparently put away a lot of food. You know, I think it's a weird character thing that we saw. This person who was immensely hungry, who eventually died of starvation. Like, I don't know. I think that's interesting, right? I'm not saying he's a sociopath. Not at all. Sociopaths have no idea for connection, and we saw him show the ability to show love and caring with the relationships he did make as Alexander Supertramp. He cared about those people. He wrote to them regularly. He was a hard worker. A sociopath, he wouldn't have that. I remember back, the first live chat was about ITW. Someone said it was like reading a documentary, and that was true, but the second part was like reading a cop's file about the whole thing. Interesting. So literally the style, it changed. Introversion is gaining energy from being alone rather than being with people. But remember, he was apparently extremely charismatic and loved spending time with people. I think he just had this disdain that being part of a family can sometimes make decisions for you on who you should be and how you should become. And I think he despised that. Unfortunately, I don't think it was his family's fault. His Kmart hiking boots are arranged neatly beneath the stove as though he's soon returning to lace them up and hit the trail. I think he realized at the end of his life that human connection is what he was missing. I've moved countries by myself a few times with a backpack and a suitcase, and it's very difficult every time. So I totally get the difficulty of leaving everything behind. It is hard. But how much do we do that? Do we not do that because of fear? And how much do we not do that because we don't want to? That's, I think, the line he was trying to find. How much am I not doing because of fear? The beer analogy, maybe because the two people shared that moment, it's not making the joy of something funny, something real. They're just noticing small things in life. I'm just reading comments now, guys. I'm just catching up to what everyone's saying, what everyone's thinking. Tessa and I actually just watched this really cool TED Talk about introversion and extroversion and the differences of people and the way they behave. I think it's pretty cool. I think you can be an introverted person but have to be extroverted in certain cases and vice versa. So I don't think that really decides as much as people think it does. What are you looking at?
They said the biggest deciding factor was how you go against your introversion.
And they said the biggest factor in the TED Talk that we watched was like how your actions decide what you are based on like how you go against or for them.
Like your personality is more decided based on how you fight against that.
Your personality is based how you fight against your introversion or against your extroversion.
Yeah, like what's important to you.
All right, guys. So now we have 15 minutes. 15 minutes left. So we're gonna wrap up. Final thoughts about Into the Wild. Let's hear them. I'm a very introverted actor, and loads of people in my life do not understand that at all. I think one of the biggest lies about actors is that they always want to be the center of attention, or they want to be out there. I think a lot of actors are just really good listeners and really good at watching and observing people. Maybe they're not the most extroverted, but if they can understand the heart of like behavior, that's where I think a lot of it is. I'm not saying you can't also be extremely extroverted and want to be an actor either. I'm just saying, like, I know as a kid, people are like, oh, go sing right now. You want to stand up and sing. And I'm like, the last thing I want to do is stand up in the middle of this restaurant and make everything about me and sing. So, yeah, I wouldn't ever have that judge at all. So really interesting read. Thank you for suggesting it. I'm glad you read along. Thank you. Into the Wild. The musical. What was the song you'd pick? Alone in My Loneliness. That's what the name of the song would be. Interesting and inspiring book. Love. Okay, hello. I don't know what happened. Okay, I do know what happened. Do you know those timers on my phone? Like the timer where you're like, I'm going to be better about being on social media. I have one of those stupid timers, although I never listen to it. And it like crashed. It didn't save. I saved it. I shared it. It should be sharing. So don't worry. It'll save. It'll share. I took care of that. So we'll worry about that later. But everyone's still here. Everyone's still talking. All right. I know. It's all right. It's our first day back. So, well, now we don't have to worry about exactly the hour. But, so let's get back. Let's just dive right back in. Our final thoughts of the book. So let's go back in. What is everyone's final thoughts? What did you guys think? What did you guys pull away? First time. I love that. Final thought. I didn't read it because I didn't know about this book club, but now I will read it, and it seems interesting. Thank you. The book tells you how important communication is. Favorite book so far? Awesome. Final thoughts? Glad to be done with it. I felt like you were going like this, Carrie. Not about the book, but I want to thank you for everything you said. No, thank you. Could you please tell everyone that we are undergoing renovations at Rosende website? And I'll post news and lives on the Rosende YouTube and social networking. Awesome. Final thoughts? He's a spoiled, selfish brat. And you are entitled to that opinion. I think it was a good reminder to not judge him too harshly because it's easy for us to do so. I think that's the easiest thing. I think he's someone we learn from. We see his intense, fierce desire to adventure, to explore, and to question everything, which is the heart of what we want here at Rosende Reads. But at the same time, we've seen where that desire led him to a place in a position where he was alone, with no one else to help him, and eventually it led to his demise. So, too much of anything is too much. The book is amazing. It teaches you a lot about love and human interaction and to question everything. Final thoughts. I liked it. It's a bit unusual and really, really far from something I would read. Thank you for challenging and expanding my reading list. Still, spoiled kid, but I can understand him a bit. I agree with that. Thank you. Final thought. He was a little extreme about the whole ordeal, but I can understand why he was that way. The book has interesting, a little sad, but gave me so many good reflections about loneliness and independence. I respected him because he was a hard worker and he never gave up. Kind of. He reminded me Rosende Reads' motto too. Well, thank you for noticing that. Really made me think about this stuff in my own life. Now I want to go camping even less. No, see, I want to go camping even more because I think there are times when we should Have you guys ever read Leaves of Grass? We should look at that. Maybe something with less angst. Okay. Well, everyone, let us thank Jon Krakauer for writing Into the Wild. Let's thank Chris McCandles for giving us this last story of his life that we can learn from and grow from and question our own lives because of. I think that's a very important thing. So you guys know the other... Now we're talking about next books. The next book is Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. I think 1984 is my favorite book right now. Yeah, I would have to say it is. So, the next book is Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. Is everyone ready? I will tell you, Toni Morrison I read for the first time in high school, and her novel, Beloved, made me fall in love with the language that she uses. I think she's a wonderful writer. I think the way she describes things and really uses... just uses the language. This is a book that I would challenge you to read out loud when you can, so you can feel the way the words work in your mouth, like I feel like you should do with poetry sometimes. I think she's incredible. I'm excited to read this book. This book was on the list of Obama's favorite books. There she is. Often, I think if you, like for Beloved, you could find the audiobook that she reads, where she reads her own novel. She's amazing. So, I'm very excited to read this. I'll read what's it about? Milkman Dead was born shortly after a neighborhood eccentric hurled himself off a rooftop in vain attempt at flight. For the rest of his life, he too will be trying to fly. With this brilliantly imagined novel, Nobel Prize laureate Toni Morrison audaciously transfigures the coming-of-age story as she follows Milkman from his Rust Belt city to the place of his family's origins. Morrison introduces an entire cast of strivers and seerses, liars and assassins, the inhabitants of a fully realized black world. I'm very excited to read this book. So, then after that, we have the next book, which will be The Joy Luck Club. We already know, right? So this will be the book right after it, which we will talk about later. And then the book that I've decided to add, The Big Reveal, is a book that I've heard a lot about, a place that I've now visited twice, that I'm excited to learn more about as I continue to visit it, hopefully. And the book will be Anne of Green Gables, another very famous female author, L.M. Montgomery. Her full name is actually Lucy Maud Montgomery, but for publishing purposes, she had to go by L.M. when she first published. I'm very excited to read this book. I've heard very good things about it. It's a musical, right? There's a musical based on it that people have seen that are obsessed with it. There's actually a TV show called Anne with an E that's out right now that talks about this area as well. Anne of Green Gables is from Prince Edward Island.
There's the original ones that are more closely.
And I think if we ask nicely, we might have a Prince Edward Island native join us to read this book. So I think if we just say, hey, would you read this book with us? She said yes. Everyone, Tessa will be joining us for these book discussions. But as soon as I saw it, I saw this cover. I was like, this cover is beautiful. I figured it would be something we should definitely read together. The back just says this. Dear old world, she murmured. You are very lovely, and I am glad to be alive in you. I think it's pretty cool. So, we have our books. We will be reading Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, and we will get to page... We can do this, right? 100 pages again? I know we're starting up again, but I think we should just dive right back in, right? Tessa, you always pick the best books. So, here's what we're going to do. We are going to read to chapter 5 for next Sunday. 112 pages, I believe. No, it's 113. 112. Up to chapter 5, not through chapter 5. So you're reading 4 chapters. 111 pages. I think we can do it. So, next Sunday at 11 a.m., we will discuss the first piece of Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. Is everyone cool with that? We can definitely do this. You're right, Anna Cat Fernandez. Yeah, 112 pages, only 4 chapters. It feels great to be back. I'm excited to be reading with all of you. I will be in LA next week, so it'll be the same time zone. Just stay posted, because I will post just to confirm that. But yes, 11 a.m. Sunday. We do it again. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. To all of the new members of Rosende Reads, my name's Alberto, and I help facilitate conversation here. What we do, we pick a book, like we're going to be doing for Toni Morrison. We read about 100 pages a week, and then we all get together and talk about it and challenge each other, and we question a lot. I believe that we are here to do one thing. We are here to keep reading. We are here to keep questioning. We are here to stay curious. And we are here to challenge everything and question everything. So, welcome if it's your first week. Welcome if you are excited to read with us, and welcome if you just want to read more. This is the place to be. There's a huge community of people that also I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of you. So the more the merrier. Tell your friends. Just welcome. And with that, I will sign off. Have a great week, guys. And remember, keep questioning, keep exploring, keep reading, and continue to be positive forces of change in your communities. There we go. Have a good one, guys. I will see you next week. Goodbye.